with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. And for those listening on Podcasting 2.0 apps, it is greatly appreciated, especially those of us listening on Fountain and those sending me boosts. So I received a 500 sat boost from @ILoveSushi. So I really appreciate you sending me that boost last podcast, where I had John Dennehy from My First Bitcoin down in El Salvador. They said, very interesting podcast. I learned a lot, so I really appreciate the feedback. And yeah, go follow My First Bitcoin. They're doing some great educational stuff down in El Salvador. And I'd also like to thank my sponsor, Coddle.co. That's CODL.co. Big shout out to Coddle.co. He tweeted early this morning that he had his second child. So go and support the cause. Go to Coddle.co. Go purchase a punch plate. They got great punch plates there that have been battle tested through thick and thin. Got a lot of great videos on his website on what he's done to test all those things. So get your Bitcoin off exchanges. Use a punch plate to store those seed phrases, and use promo code GreenCandle at checkout. That's promo code GREENCANDLE at checkout, and you'll get 10% off your entire order. Now, I've got a very special guest. I've got NFL linebacker Vince Biegel. Vince, how you doing today?
You guys, I'm doing great, Brandon. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Of course, man. So, I believe current Baltimore Raven, is that correct? I don't know how like the contract situation's lining up or anything, but yeah, Baltimore Raven, right?
Current Baltimore Raven. Unfortunately, finished the year on IR. I tore my Achilles this season, so I finished the year on IR. Now residing back home my home down here in South Florida.
That's awesome. So I'm also in Florida. I'm up in Tampa, so a little bit north of you, not too far. But I did look at your Wikipedia page, so I'm going to have to get out in front of this. You're a Wisconsin Badger, and you were drafted by the Packers. I'm rocking my Chicago Bears shirt right now, so I had to do it. But, you know, how badly do you wish that you were born in the Chicagoland area and drafted by the Bears? I mean, come on, right?
Being born in Chicago, being born in Illinois, absolutely not, Brandon. but playing for the storied Chicago Bears, I really don't hold any allegiance to the Packers or the Bears or anybody. Brandon, I like to say my favorite team is who's ever signed the checks.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, of course, right? So you've had a little bit of, you alluded to it. You ended the year on IR, and I saw, on everything like last year, you kind of had a similar injury. So how's the recovery process going? How's the morale with everything? And how's all that going?
Brandon, my rehab's been going excellent. It's been disappointing. This year especially was disappointing because I was having a phenomenal training camp. Was the starting outside linebacker for the Ravens, and then tore my Achilles during training camp, which put me on IR the rest of the season. But this time has really allowed me, though, Brandon, to be able to dig in and to really explore other interests of mine, and Bitcoin is being one of them, which we'll obviously get into today. And then also being able to spend time with my family as well, with my 2 daughters and my wife. So I'm a blessed man, and I'm looking forward to getting back out on the field in 2023. But this time has allowed me to be able to develop myself in other ways off the field.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, right? Because unfortunately, injuries do happen, and I think the average career in the NFL is about like 3 or 4 years. So unfortunately, you risk a lot and you dedicate a lot of your time to get into that NFL and to get into that league, but sometimes just situations don't always play out. So, on that note, why don't you guys, I guess, kind of describe the overall just kind of vibe when it comes to, more personal finance? Because as like an outsider sports fan, as I am myself, it seems like there's been kind of a general shift when it comes to professional athletes, that they're kind of stressing a little bit more on personal finance. Is that something that you're noticing when it comes to just like the NFL in general?
Well, Brandon, you mentioned the average NFL career. NFL career is roughly about three years. So the average NFL career is 3 years, and we always joke around, the NFL stands for not for long. And I have the pleasure of going into my 7th NFL season next year. And it's been a grind, man. It's every year you take 1 year at a time. It's taxing. I've had injuries. I've had 4 surgeries since I've been in the NFL, and that just comes with the territory. But the overall landscape of what finances are in the NFL, I think is actually really grown a lot, and a big credit to the NFLPA. So the NFLPA, they have so many programs which help us along the way, whether that be educational or our 401k, and being able to tap into that is excellent. And just the programs that allow players to be able to get educated, and then also just tools like NFLPA provides free background checks for any of your advisors or people close to you. I don't know if you can hear my daughter in the background. She's screaming. That's my dad life right now.
Exactly.
But yeah, and from the 401k standpoint, they do a great job of actually matching your 401k, and it's one of the best. So I feel the NFL is doing everything they can to be able to prepare players for life after football.
Yeah, and that's great stuff. So, you're talking about life after football, but let's talk about a little bit of life in football, right? Because you're in the locker room. Obviously, now you ended the year unfortunately on IR, but why don't you kind of describe a little bit about like the just overall format of the NFL locker room? Because I believe there's 52 men on the NFL roster, and there's a lot of different position groups and kind of a lot of things that go into it. And you meet a lot, you practice a lot with the team, but a lot of times you're kind of separated into different groups. So why don't you kind of describe, I guess, that relationship and kind of how that goes?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize it's a really small roster when you really think about it. It's a 53-man roster, excuse me, and you have to also account for the kicker, the punter, and the long snapper. So there's really 50 spots, and for the listeners who have never really been in football, really don't know how a structured locker room is set up. Is you have your offense and your defense. So you'll meet as a team. Everybody will come in at 7:30. Everybody will meet together. Then it gets broken up into offense and defense. Right, you meet with your defensive and offensive coordinators, and then from there, then you break off into your subsets of position groups. So you got your inside linebackers, your outside linebackers, your defensive line, and sometimes safeties and DBs. Sometimes safeties and corners meet separate, and sometimes they meet the same. And then same thing on offense. You got your wide receivers, your running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and offensive line are all meeting in separate rooms. So, and then on top of that too, you have special teams. So after you get done with meeting all of your team meeting, your offense, defense meetings, your position meetings, then you have special teams meetings, which I'm always in, which is punt return, kickoff, and kickoff return. So a lot of meetings, a lot of organization, but it's really fun to be able to be in a locker room because there's so many different people from different backgrounds. You got guys from all over the country. You got guys who are black guys, white guys, Polynesian guys, Asian guys, all subsects and all ethnicities and all religions and backgrounds. And I think that's why the game of football is the greatest sport, because you have all these collection of all these different people, all these different body types, right? You got the 360-pound guy, and then you also have a guy who's 160 pounds who runs a 4.2. So I think the game of football is really fun. It's a really unique collection of men, and I'm always thankful to be a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And it is, like you said, it is very unique because, 53-man roster, their team, there's a bunch of positions. But, at the end of the day, you break off a lot into your own kind of separate groups when it comes down to it. And even like there's a big divide between offense and defense too, right? So, when it comes to, I guess, the overall team, the full 53-man roster, like how does the camaraderie work that way? Like, do you guys, is it generally like, all right, you meet with the same, like your linebackers, your outside linebackers every practice. So obviously those are probably your closest on the team, but are you hanging out with the wide receivers, or is there a way that you guys kind of stress to make that bond? So, an outside linebacker is hanging out with people on offense as well.
Well, they do a really good job of like mixing up the locker. So in the locker room, all the players are mixed together. So you got the offensive line with the defensive line and the DBs with, it's all just intermixed. So you have a collection and you're able to kind of, build relationships. And for the listeners who've, football, they think that we just kind of just show up to the games. No, this is a 365 7 days 365 7 days a week. We're always working our craft. Even in the off seasons, we're doing stuff and training and rehabbing and working ourselves. Just like investors. So, that's how you're building your camaraderie, and you're there all the time, right? So you're practicing with guys, you're hitting guys, you're watching film with guys, you're watching film with the coaches. Obviously, they're coaching up, and you really start to form these relationships with guys, and even in the meal rooms, right? You're having lunch and dinner and breakfast with guys. You really build these relationships, and especially because, there's not too many times where a collection of 21 to 30-something-year-old guys are able to all come together and really do what you do. So, I always say I'm so thankful to be able to be a part of the NFL and being able to be on a roster every single year. It's a very cool thing. And I think also too, so I said, you have your main roster, and then you also have your practice squad as well. So that's around 16 players, I believe, 12 to 16, I can't remember. So of practice squad guys as well, who are excellent players. So overall, it's a great locker room.
Yeah, and obviously it's extremely difficult to be in the NFL, and like less than 1% of players who play in college football get drafted and everything like that. But you kind of alluded to a little bit earlier about you've been able to work on yourself a little bit, kind of explore some things that you might like outside of football, just due to circumstances. So explain kind of how you got into Bitcoin. Tell us about the orange pill story, kind of how you found it, and how you got to where you're at today.
No, that's a great question, Brandon. So when I tore my Achilles my first time, which was in 2020, I tore my left Achilles in 2020, and then I tore my right one in 2022. So when I tore it the first time, I really started getting into. I think also when I tore my Achilles the first time, I realized the game isn't going to last forever, and I need to really start. I have a financial advisor, and I was, invested and so forth, but I really want to take control of my own finances and be financially literate. So at that point, I really started just diving into podcasts, investing podcasts, and one of them was the Investors Podcast. We Study Billionaires, and there's a guy on there named Preston Pish, who huge fan of. And I think it wasn't even until, like episode 10 I was listening to that this guy started talking about this thing called Bitcoin. And a lot of things just kind of clicked in my mind. Me being a libertarian, kind of just the way I think, everything in Bitcoin made a lot of sense. So at that point in time, I went all in on Bitcoin. Not all in, but I started investing in Bitcoin, and mind you, I probably invested in Bitcoin September, October of 2020. So not a bad time to get in at all. And had a huge run up, and then had a huge retracement, and learned so many things along the way. But that was kind of my orange pill story on how I really understood Bitcoin and that whole process of learning about it, and Preston talking about it, and then I started listening to other individuals speak on Bitcoin, and just realizing how important that this needs to be an allocation of my portfolio.
Yeah, and it's funny. You and I both have kind of a similar orange pill story. I actually was listening to the Investors Podcast, the We Study Billionaires, and Preston I think he had like Saifedean Ammous, who obviously, Bitcoin standard and great spokesman for Bitcoin and everything like that. And Plan B, who does, he does the stock to flow, which obviously kind of fell apart recently. But that kind of got me excited. At first when you get into it, you're looking at the price a lot, and you don't really think the fundamentals right away. But
Yep.
Shout out to Preston for doing that great work and getting people orange pilled left and right. It seems all walks of life and everything like that. But you mentioned already that you had like a financial advisor, but you've kind of trying to take a little bit more control of your own finances. Well, talk to me about what your financial advisor said. Maybe or did you even bring it up to him about Bitcoin? Like, what did he say, and what was kind of his initial reaction to that?
Yeah, my financial advisor is he's a phenomenal guy, and I come to him with all financial questions, not just crypto and equities, but also we do venture capital deals together, real estate. He's a guy who I come to for all questions. And when I mentioned Bitcoin, he was like, Vince, if you feel passionate about it, I'm all in with you, man. Like he is, he did his due diligence as well, and he understood what the Bitcoin was. His position that he actually can't hold Bitcoin personally, but he was fully supportive of me, which I was surprised, right? Because I think when you have a financial advisor, he doesn't have a banking background, by the way, but when you have a guy who comes from the kind of the financial sector, they have their reservations regarding crypto, but he did not. He had to give me his full blessing, and I would have bought Bitcoin anyways, Brandon. So it really didn't matter, but it was good to get his assurance.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like, let's bring it back to a little bit now, the NFL, right? So you brought it up in like 2020, and that's kind of when we saw, a lot of professional athletes seem to get into it, especially the NFL, right? So we have Russell Okung seemed to be the first one that kind of got in and got a lot of publicity for taking some of his paycheck in Bitcoin. Saquon Barkley announced that he's taking like all of his sponsorships in Bitcoin. OBJ and Trevor Lawrence got, Bitcoin and some other cryptos as well. So, it seemed like that was kind of, the full on trend. So did you kind of notice at that time in the locker room, everybody was kind of, talking about, not only Bitcoin, but crypto to a lesser extent, just kind of, what is this kind of thing? Like, let me get in on it. Let me get on this trend as it's shooting up.
Yeah, so Russell Okung and I are kind of he was before me. So actually, Russell and I we were talking, and actually he's gone full. He's not on really social media anymore. He hasn't really posted or done much in a while. But when I got in at a really good, luckily I got in at a good time. It was just pure luck. It wasn't anything analytical. So when I got in, it started going. Seeing a huge price increase, and me being the guy that I am, I was very vocal in the locker room, like, hey guys, educating guys on crypto. And at that time, guys are very receptive, right? Because I think at that time in 2020, crypto was the hottest thing. Everybody's talking about crypto and Bitcoin and altcoins. So I think a lot of those guys, it's easy for even retail guys to get kind of caught up and swept away with the emotions. So I got a lot of my teammates into crypto, not just Bitcoin, but other altcoins, like mostly layer one stuff and guys with solid projects. But it's a fun thing, and there's a small group of guys in the locker room that we actually started our own little group chat, where it's just kind of a crypto group chat. We keep tabs on each other, share information. But I was really proud, and I'm still to this day. Always a huge crypto advocate in the locker room, always sharing information. But as you now fast forward, that was in 2020, right? And as you fast forward to this season, seeing the huge, capitulation of Bitcoin and what we have and saw in 2022, Bitcoin wasn't sexy anymore, and crypto wasn't sexy anymore, and you could definitely see those conversations weren't as much and weren't as exciting.
Yeah, and I mean exactly that, right? I think everybody kind of it's tough in the bear market. It really is, and it's kind of your first one now. You obviously saw the run up and the big crash, And it seemed like, I think especially OBJ, who took a lot of his paycheck in Bitcoin, I think he saw like maybe it shrink by like 60 or 70%, that paycheck. And
Yep.
so, the Bears obviously came out and kind of were trying to dunk on him on Twitter and everything like that. So do you kind of like, I guess now, do you kind of, when you bring it up to just, maybe not the group chat or some other people that were a little bit receptive before, but you bring it up to maybe some of the people who are on the fence a little bit before, do you see them, I guess, just severely pushing back on you now, just kind of thinking it's all a scam and that you're going to lose all your money, it's going to zero, that kind of thing?
Well, they definitely have more fuel to the fire, right? They got some ammunition now. But really, my thesis though, Brandon, hasn't changed whatsoever. If anything, it's only gotten stronger with new things that have come out. One thing though, Brandon, that I have really realized was, and I didn't really realize it till just till you see the huge downfall, was when you are a person who has influence and when you have a person who can influence people to make decisions, it's a great responsibility. And when I saw those guys buy in and we saw a huge price decrease, in my heart, I felt a lot of pain because I was a big reason why those guys invested into it. And yes, they, at the end of the day, they make their own decisions, their financial decisions, absolutely. But I was a friend, a teammate that they trusted in, and I use my words much more carefully now. Um, I'm much more, hey, you should buy this. I should be like, hey, you should look at this. So I use my words much more carefully. I'm very, and that even in my own portfolio, I'm much more strict. I have a strict guideline of what I'm investing in. I'm not, I don't invest in, crap coins like Dogecoin. I'm sorry for all the Dogecoin holders or Shiba Inu or, I kind of just, I invest in projects that have, a real use case, stuff that has a, not necessarily stuff that's going to see a 200x, but stuff that's going to be, rock solid investments that's not going anywhere. And um, also being just a good friend and not steering guys in the wrong direction. I really learned a big lesson there.
Yeah, and you nailed it on the head there, right? I mean, it is really tough, right? I mean, you try to orange pill people, especially on the run up. You see a lot of people FOMOing in, and
Yes.
then as everybody likes to jump on the train when it's going up, and then everybody likes to point the finger and laugh when it's going down, right? So there's both sides to it. So it is kind of a tough game to kind of jump in. But I think the biggest thing that you kind of said, it's a lot of the education's perspective. Like you said, your thesis hasn't changed, and it's kind of having the long term outlook. And when you're pointing to a lot of these short term price movements, it is really tough because you can get caught up in checking the price as it's going up and then checking the price as it's going down too, and just freaking out that you're losing a lot of money when in reality it's paper money because you still have the same amount of Bitcoin, right? So what I guess what kind of was that aha moment for you for Bitcoin, that now that you've invested in it and you have Bitcoin and everything like that, that you're just confident with that investment, and then you're like, I'll ride these waves, and I'm very confident with where it's going, because I think no matter what you're investing in, I think that's, one of the main things that you need to do is just have conviction in whatever you're investing in, know what you're investing in, because, at the end of the day, you'll be able to ride those waves, and it's very difficult to time the market, as you said. So what was that kind of like aha click in the head moment where you're like, okay, no matter what, I know what I'm very confident in this investment, or holding Bitcoin.
Well, Brandon, really, what was my aha moment was when in 2020, right? We have COVID, and you saw the stimulus, and you saw the money printing by the federal government, and at that point in time, that was my aha moment. And I worked my butt off for my money, putting my body on the line, and I'm like, my hard-earned dollars that I'm earning, right? They're printing off trillions of that. So really why I invested in Bitcoin was that was again going to be my hedge against the debasement of our currency. That's essentially what my Bitcoin position was, and that was my thesis. It hasn't changed whatsoever. We've obviously seen a shifting. We've seen a huge shift in the overall market, but in regards to my thesis, hasn't changed because we all know all roads lead back to the money printer, and all roads essentially lead back to Bitcoin. And um, if anything, I doubled down on my position. And whether it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I have the patience, Brandon. I have the conviction to ride it through, and it will rebound. And when it goes parabolic, Brandon, we saw that in 2020. That's when that's when times are fun. That's when it's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the times it's fun on Twitter and everybody's, we're all rich again. But hey, now we're all poor, right? Because it's just sitting and floating at this 20K mark. Obviously, that's tongue in cheek and everything like that. But what I think is interesting is that you mentioned in 2020 that's when you got in, and that's kind of when we saw a lot of these professional athletes start to take it in paychecks, sponsorships, what have you, in Bitcoin. But we're not really hearing about that much anymore. So, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here right now and ask, like, if you had to put a percentage, how many, like, is it 50%? Is it over 50%? How many do you think in the locker room, average NFL locker room, kind of believe in Bitcoin or have some sort of, like, maybe a position, inclination? Obviously, you don't need to dox anything like that, but would you say majority are kind of leading in favor towards it, or do you still think that there's a wide, I guess, knowledge gap when it comes to a lot of the NFL locker rooms?
There's still a big knowledge gap, Brandon. Still, I would say there's still less than 10% of athletes from the locker rooms that I've been in, and from the relationships and the conversations that I've had. And there's a huge gap. There's guys who fully understand it, and there's guys who have absolutely, like, what do you say? Like, only crypto I've ever heard is Dogecoin or Shiba Inu. It's that big of a gap. And I think over time, I think not just athletes, but I think overall retail investors and the general population, crypto will become more mainstream, more adopted, but it just takes time. It takes time. And I honestly feel fortunate enough that I had the time, Brandon, to be able to listen and to be able to get that information, because I think that's going to be huge information that I've been able to put forth to my family, from not just not just my wife and my kids, but also for my brother, my sister, my mom, and my dad, who are all now investors in Bitcoin. And like you said, though, comes with great responsibility, right? But I think more and more players are interested in crypto, but you have things like FTX, though, that you take one step forward and sometimes it takes two steps back, right? You have everybody was talking about the Tom Brady situation where he was involved with a spokesperson of FTX, and it's everybody talks about those bad instances, but when really in crypto, there's so many great things that aren't being talked about. I think it'll just take time to flush some of that bad money out of the system. And it's also a lesson for athletes when you put your name with a brand. Really to do the best due diligence you can, though. And that kind of is it's a hard thing to say with FTX because no one really expected that. And I know Tom Brady lost a lot of money, and I know a lot of athletes lost a lot of money, which kind of goes to show, making sure you self-custody your own crypto.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you say that 10% number because I I think that it's probably around the same for retail investors. Maybe we get in this little bubble of Bitcoin meetups or Bitcoin Twitter, that kind of stuff, and we think populations are really growing. But I think a locker room's kind of like just a microcosm of the entire globe, where we're still having a big knowledge gap. We have Bitcoin and the greater ecosystem growing rapidly, but still a lot of people don't really know, and they really don't choose to know. It's not something that interests them, and it's not something like that. But you brought up an interesting point with FTX and kind of like the marketing aspect of it, right? Because as an athlete, especially a professional athlete, you guys have a lot of followers on all social media. You get followed from, from probably from high school on. A lot of people like recognize like, hey, this person's a great athlete. They're going to XYZ University, in your case, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got a huge fan base, Big Ten. You guys are on TV every Saturday. And then you go from that to getting drafted into the NFL. So, obviously your following grows on all social media platforms and everything else, and brands start to approach you. So, I guess with that FTX thing, are you noticing, athletes, I guess, more skeptical on the brands that are kind of approaching them and like doing that? Because, I want to hear your answer first, but I'll get into how I don't really blame Tom Brady too much on the whole FTX situation.
Oh, listen, man, I don't blame him either, man. We're all entrepreneurs. We're all here to make a buck, man. No, I don't think I don't even think our athlete, some of the athletes I'm dealing with, they don't really even know the difference between FTX and Binance and all the centralized exchanges. I think it kind of just set the overall market back, Brandon, in my opinion, giving more skepticism on the overall Bitcoin and crypto and what the adoption is and what, is it a scam or is it real? It's, I think FTX kind of put a black eye on that. I think it's going to take a while to kind of for it to recover, not just for, some of the guys that I deal with and some, the athletes' perspective. But I think, Brandon better than me. I think the overall population,
Yeah, and I agree. I think like FTX is just like, a lot of people just still group them all together. FTX is this, Bitcoin, crypto, all in one. And
Yep.
when really, like you said, it's more about just the self sovereignty, holding Bitcoin in cold storage, doing all that kind of stuff to kind of help, avoid situations like that, because you described it right. It's a centralized exchange. So, one of the ethos, obviously, with Bitcoin is, having self sovereignty, taking personal ownership of all that kind of thing. So, how did that conversation go? Because I can tell you how the conversation went with my parents when I've been trying to tell them to buy Bitcoin, and then they have it on an exchange, and then all of a sudden, like, they might not be able to pull it off, and they're freaking out and other things like that too. So, as your orange pilling family, not only athletes, as your orange pilling family members and everything like that, how are they kind of taking that? Are they taking it a little bit different maybe than some of your buddies on the team, or is it still kind of the same conversation?
Well, I'm sure, Brandon, for you, it was an awkward Thanksgiving and holiday season this year. No, I'm just
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, my dad, he wouldn't be able to self custody his own stuff, so he owns his on a centralized exchange. My dad's an old school guy. He fully understands Bitcoin. It makes a lot of sense to him. He's in the same boat as me. It's kind of his hedge against the debasement. So he holds it on a centralized exchange. He's cool with that. He understands the risks. He's thankful he wasn't on FTX, but that's just my dad. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there too that, self custody though is a big responsibility, and as athletes, you come into money early. It's a huge responsibility, Brandon. Okay, if you're some of these guys, a lot of athletes, we get cut. We move from team to team, right? We're traveling all over the country, being able to say, okay, here's my keys. I'm going to self custody this. It's a big responsibility, especially if you're talking about you have a chunk of your portfolio on that. That's a lot of responsibility. And I think that also too is a huge scare for a lot of players. But I think that's where things kind of like Unchained Capital, shout out to them, those come into effect, right? You're able to have a, kind of a third party, if you will, be able to help you with that process.
Yeah, and like you brought up a great point, right? So I mean, especially for athletes, no matter what upbringing you come from, when you sign that NFL contract or NBA or MLB, one of these professional sports leagues, you're young, 18 to 21, 22, maybe a little bit older, 23 or so, but you're getting a big jolt of money right away, right? And so you're taking that responsibility where you're essentially, now maybe with the NIL deals, the college kids are a little bit luckier than maybe some of the past. But when you were an athlete, when I was an athlete back in my heyday and I was running track in college and everything like that, I unfortunately didn't have the NIL deals or anything like that. So, I mean, you're a poor college kid, and then all of a sudden you're just jolting into a bunch of money. And like you said, you're traveling around, people recognize you now, and you kind of, run into this difficult position where it's like, okay, well, if you learn about, Bitcoin or stocks or something like that, or, first you're like, all right, what's this big first purchase I'm going to make? What's this, what am I going to do with this? And you're not really thinking about the long term, right? You're thinking like, oh my God, I just got all of this, initial money, as soon as you just get drafted and get into the league. So, on that note, you talked about the NFL's retirement program, how they're matching the 401k and doing all that kind of stuff. What was, I guess the first like big purchase that you made? Did you make some big purchase, or did you make maybe something now that you're looking back, you're like, man, when I first signed that contract, maybe I should have invested that or saved that instead of buying this?
No, Brandon, that's a phenomenal story. And I wish I had a funny story like, man, I bought that $20,000 chain. I regret. Brandon, I'm telling you what, I'm a frugal guy. I don't spend much on anything. I save everything I have. I invest everything I have. So I really don't. I guess the biggest thing I bought right when I got into the league was, I had to pay for my wedding, and then my wife and we went all out and we went to Bora Bora for our honeymoon. That was my biggest. Splurge on something, right? Other than a vehicle, that was my biggest splurge. But I do have a funny story for the listeners, because I know everybody's like, well, let me hear a funny story. So, the Miami Dolphins. So, at the end of the year, it's called a rookie dinner. You take out the rookies to a really fancy restaurant. Everybody go, it's usually the offense, the defense, right? So if the second round pick or the first round pick, or, those guys will go out to dinner, and you run up the tab and you stick the bill on the rookies. Okay. And for the listeners, this typical bill ranges from $20,000 to $35,000. Okay.
Ooh, man. Oh man.
20 to 35 grand. Well, Miami one year, these rookies, and also throughout the year, rookies, you have to kind of, pay your dues. So you have to bring Chick-fil-A and Popeye's chicken and KFC on the planes when we do away games, right? Because the vets, we want our snacks and stuff like that. And even like, we want our snacks like, beef jerky, Airhead, seeds for the, your position rooms. Okay. Well, these rookies weren't doing that. And the guys on the team were like, hey, there's like guys like Dominic and Sue.
Oh
Like,
man. That's an intimidating guy. Yeah, I wouldn't want to cross him.
if you guys keep this up, this end of the year bill is going to be crazy. Well, nothing happened. Nothing happened. The rookies kept blowing it off. So we were down in Miami. The restaurant that they went to was and I wasn't on the Miami yet. This was the year before I got there. So this is the story that I was told. Okay. Then they went to a really fancy restaurant. I think it's Prime 112. One of those fancy steak restaurants down in Miami. Okay. Guys, Dominic and Sue and all the vets ordered bottles of wine to go.
Oh man.
They ordered raw, like they really ordered steak, not cooked yet, to go. They ordered plates of food were still coming out before, everyone's guys were leaving. The bill ended up being $100,000. $100. So, you got stories like that in the NFL where guys aren't smart with their money. But I will say this though, Brandon, players, you hear about those you hear about the horror stories of guys losing all their money with bad investments. Players nowadays, Brandon, are doing a phenomenal job. They're being smarter with their money. Yes, you still have the 10% of guys in the league who are being money, but overall, guys are being much more smarter. One of the ways they're doing that, and I don't agree with it. So usually after every game, you get paid every other week, and you get paid based on so it's 18-week pay period, right? Well, some of the younger guys were spending their money too much, so then they spread that out to a 36 pay week period. So now you get half the check you usually do, but it's spread out over a longer period of time. Which to me, I like to get my money. If I'm working, I want to get that money so I can invest it. But I understand. There's guys who it might help. So I think it's an okay thing, but that's one example that the NFL is trying to do to help kind of players to budget, be smart with their money. Because when you're a young kid, don't get any money, and then all of a sudden your first check comes in, and it's 2 game checks. You're talking about a $50,000 check or whatever it is, depending on what the contract is. $50,000 check, that's a lot of money, and you've never had that money before. You're going to want to spend on some shoes or get your wardrobe updated. I think that's where the financial literacy is so important, to be able to educate yourself. And I'll be honest, when I was a rookie I don't have a finance background. I didn't study finance at Wisconsin. So my first couple years in the league, I was just, hey, I just want to be in the league, and I saved everything. I didn't invest in anything. I didn't spend anything. I just saved. And that was good for me because I learned just to grind, just to focus on the game of football, making a roster, making another year. And then I knew as I got older, I would understand how to invest it, got connected with the right people, and now I'm in a good position. Always looking to learn more. I would be the first to tell you, I'm a learner, and I would never say I know more than anybody else. So I'm always looking to learn more, and I do have a lot to learn more, but it's just one day at a time, and being that learner.
Yeah, that's great stuff, and that is really interesting, and that's, I think, the great quality, and that's why you're here today, talking to me about Bitcoin and spreading that in locker rooms, is because you're just very I guess, like, actively learning, which I think a lot of people kind of in society, the way it shapes up is when you get to college, once you finish college, you get that degree. A lot of people think it's like, you're done learning, you're done kind of going over those things, but they don't realize like how many things like you can learn outside of school after it, through podcasts, other mediums, other things. YouTube University, you can just go find a lot of people just teaching a lot of things on there, and it could greatly benefit you in the long term, which obviously it seems like you're doing right now by learning about financial literacy and all those kind of stuff. But I do have a question for you on the game check aspect, because I think this is kind of interesting. They talked about it with Michael Jordan in the NBA when he was traveling around, that his game checks were taxed based on the states that he was playing in. Is that the same with the NFL?
That is absolutely correct, 100% correct. And when you file your taxes, you usually have about 12 states. Usually you're filing not that many, but usually about like 10 states that you're filing in. So I don't do my own taxes. I have a CPA who takes care of all that for me. But that's correct. I'm playing in New York. That means I'm getting taxed in New York, and that's why it's so nice when you're playing in a place like Florida, Tennessee, Texas. Those are 3 really great spots where half of the games, right? So you get a 18-week season. Half of those games are going to be in your hometown, so no state income tax. Now I'm in Baltimore, which is a different story, but you go where you need to. But in an ideal world, right? It's nice having those Florida taxes, no state income tax.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, exactly like you said. So, I mean, a lot of the plebs listening, they've all flocked to either like Nashville, Austin. Those are kind of like the hot spots, in Miami for Bitcoiners. But obviously, there's some all over the place, right? So, unfortunately, some of those don't have maybe the luxury to move to some of these non-state income taxes place. But it is kind of an interesting little tidbit that they put in there, where it's like, even though you're traveling for work and you're working in that state, just for a team, you don't make your schedule, right? You don't get to really, I mean, you kind of have some say, but at the end of the day, you're drafted, and like you said, you got to go to where you get signed, because yeah, it is a tough league, right? It's a professional athletics, right? So if you're not performing, they're gonna find somebody who is. So it is tough, but it is kind of an interesting little tidbit there that if you're playing in New York, or if you're playing in one of these other states with like high state income tax, that game check's going to be significantly less than if you're playing in a state with no state income tax. So that is a little unfortunate. But while I got you here too, we're almost to the end of the NFL season, right? We got the NFC and AFC championship game this Sunday, and then the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. Then it's a long off season. So do you got any big plans for the off season? What are you going on vacation? Are you continuing the rehab? What's kind of the overall plan for the relaxation period that you get? Obviously, you still got to work out. You still got to do all those things. But, do you get some R&R?
Yeah, no, Brand, that's a phenomenal question. And each one of my off seasons is a little different. So if I have surgery, that means I kind of have to be a little more locked in. So I really won't take a huge chunk of time off. I took some time off for the holidays, and usually when you're in season, you're full steam ahead, so you don't have any time off. I took a little time off during the holidays. I took about a week and a half, and then right back to work in my rehab. And with my Achilles injuries, I really don't have the time to be able to take off, 2 weeks or whatever. But typically, if I'm healthy, what I usually do is once the season's over, I usually take around anywhere around about 3 weeks off, where I don't lift a weight. I'll do some just light stretching around the house. Wake up whenever I wake up, and because that's just kind of me unplugging from just the regimen of waking up at 5:45 every day, in there till 6:45 every day, getting back home, the grind of it, your body hurting, the stresses of the season, position battles. That's so important to be able to unplug, Brandon. It's huge. It's really important. And then from that point in time, then I slowly start ramping up my program, where I'm not doing heavy weights, just a lot of atrophy stuff, where a lot of push-ups, and I get back into my gym, and I'll do like light weights with higher rep volume. And then as I progress throughout my systems, then the workout program system, you can start getting to the lower weight, heavyweight stuff, heavyweight, lower rep stuff. So that's typically what I do. And then when April hits, that's when OTAs start. So end of April, so May, June, so about 2 months there, you're all in with your OTAs. You got about 6 weeks off, and then you're right back in a training camp, and then it's all over again.
Yeah.
So that's 6 weeks. I usually train a couple weeks up in Wisconsin. I spend the other 4 weeks at my residence here in Florida. And, that's kind of what my system is. And that's typically what a lot of kind of NFL vets do. You got guys who have their in-season home wherever they're playing. So if I'm in Baltimore, I don't have a house there, but, you have a house there, and then you have your house wherever your off season is. But, it's important to unplug though, Brandon. And sometimes I kind of, those few weeks I go off the handle. I kind of eat a little bit naughty. Get to enjoy a cheeseburger more than I usually do. But when I'm rehabbing now, I'm pretty much just locked in, because it's a long journey back now. Got to stay disciplined.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, man, it's a grind. Obviously, I can't relate. I'm not an NFL player or anything like that, but I do, respect a ton of what you do. But the reason we got connected is because you said, are there any any Bitcoin meetups going on in South Florida? So are you planning on, kind of continuing that? Obviously, when you're like in the heart of season, it's going to be difficult to do any Bitcoin meetups, but are you planning on doing that? Maybe planning on going to Bitcoin Miami? You going to do any conferences or anything like that during the off season?
Brandon, when I saw that tweet, I got an overflowing message of people who are in the local, South Florida area, even in the area of Davie where I live, Davie meetups, which is kind of just west of Fort Lauderdale, Davie meetups, I got linked up. I'm actually gonna do some fun stuff down in for the Bitcoin Miami. Can't wait for that. So I think it just goes to show like um, just the community Bitcoin is, and just the good people that are in it. And yes, there's a lot of bad actors, but I think um, there's a lot of good people in it. And being able to connect with those guys, I actually connected with the gentleman who's one of the high ups in Bitcoin Magazine. So I'm actually going to be flying out to Nashville and going to meet with him and check out all the stuff that they got going over there. So it just goes to show it's all about connections, man. It's just putting yourself out there, like, hey guys, there's a meetup, and just the amount of connections you're able to make. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's outstanding, and that's how we're lucky to be here today. And I'm very glad you tweeted that out, and I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you here for an hour or so. So why don't you tell everybody? You've been very generous with your time, obviously, and I appreciate you having you. Appreciate having you on. I'll have to see you at Bitcoin Miami or some of these other. Maybe I'll come down to South Florida for a meetup or something like that. But why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and other mediums?
Yeah, you guys can follow me at Vince Biegel on Twitter. I'm very active on that. I have an Instagram, Vince Biegel, and you guys kind of see I post a lot about my family, post a lot about my faith, post a lot about the journey of football. Not a big flashy guy, but I think it's just kind of fun for people to show a glimpse of kind of. I consider myself just a blue collar NFL guy who's making his way through the NFL. Just being able to share my story and being able to try to help as many people along the way, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. Midwest tough, man. You got that Wisconsin tough in you, the Midwest grind, dude. So I appreciate it. We'll have to have you back on maybe after next season, and maybe my Bears will sign you. I don't know. They're looking. They got a lot of cap space, so hopefully, we'll come on there and I'll be able to root for you there. But good luck for you the rest of this offseason. I hope you have a speedy recovery. Your Achilles heals up well, and I'm definitely going to be rooting for you this next season. So I'm excited for it. And thanks so much for coming on.
Brandon, man, can't thank you enough. Really, really had a good time being on here. Would absolutely love to be a Chicago Bear.
There we go. Bear down.
When I was in the Senior Bowl, they actually coached us up, so I have a lot of respect. It was John Fox at the time; he's not there, but a lot of respect for the Bears program. Thank you guys again for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Of course, as always.